And I'm gonna let all the humans in. Okay.
What were we? Top lever?
Hello everyone. Welcome. While we're waiting for everyone to get in, please make yourselves comfortable. Feel free to name yourself to however you would like to be referred to during this call. And yeah, get yourself a drink, put on some sweatpants. It's going to be a great event. I'm just going to give us a few minutes just for everyone to get settled and for everyone to get in from the waiting room. And oh, good group tonight. Thank you all so much for giving us part of your evening. I'm very excited that I recognize all of the names currently on this call. While we're waiting, I'm going to give it another minute or so. I'm just going to go over some Zoom best practices. I find that if you are able to keep yourself on mute if you are not speaking, it really helps knock out a lot of that background noise that makes it difficult to hear. So if you could do that, that would be particularly helpful. Looking at you, Howie. Yeah, and again, if you could name yourself to how you would like to be referred to here. And I think that we will get started shortly. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here again. My name is Sara Pilavin. I am very happy to know most of you. I am part of the Israel Ride team. And this call is geared towards newer and prospective riders and other people that want to help out, meet some of our newbies, and maybe have some of their own questions because it's been a while. So what I like to do first is I like to go around and see who's here and where we're calling from and what brought you here. So I am going to drop that prompt in the chat. And I'm going to go around and call on people. And when I call on you, just unmute yourself and say your name, where you're calling from, and what brought you here today. So I apologize because sometimes when new people come in, it shifts everything on my screen. If I skip over you, it's not intentional, and please do speak up. First up on my screen, I have Mark Sindler.
Hi, Sarah. I'm from Pittsburgh. The ride that I hope to go on in October combines two of my favorite things, being in Israel and bicycle riding. I've been commuting to and from where I spend most of my days as part of my job for the last 10 or 11 years. So I'm an avid bicyclist, and I'm hoping to go with one of my neighbors, actually, who's here tonight as well. It looks like Gary Dubin. So I'm glad to be here.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Next up on my screen, I have Jennifer Markowitz.
Hi, so I'm Jennifer Markowitz. I'm calling from New York City. And sort of like Mark, I think I have the same interests without the commute, because in New York City, it's a little hairier, I think. But I love cycling. I love Israel. I've been on a lot of back roads, shorter, well, my goal here is to go a little bit longer, shorter tours. And it's been a while. And I guess I'm here just to sort of gather information.
Great. Thanks so much for coming, Jennifer. Next up, I have Bill Rosenbaum.
Hi, Bill Rosenbaum from San Diego, California, and I will be riding on my second ride. I'm just looking to get additional current information as to how plans are going forward with the trip. I don't have any specific questions. I'm just looking for the latest and most current information available.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Bill. Next up, I have Ralph Rosenberg.
Hi, I'm Ralph Rosenberg. If all goes well, this will be my 8th Israel ride. I live in Avon, Connecticut, but I'm in New Hampshire right now. The question that I have actually is, I got some information from the Israel Tourism Board saying that when one wants to leave to come back home, you need to be tested, have a swab done within 72 hours of departure. And that may not be so easy to accomplish. I wanted to know if that's been figured into the equation at the present time.
That is a great question, Ralph. Thank you. And we are excited to address that. Next up on my screen, I have David Green.
Hi, I'm David Green. I live outside of Princeton, New Jersey. My cousin, who is an avid cyclist and longtime fundraiser for the Dana-Farber Institute, because he's a 14-year survivor of pancreatic cancer, said, hey, let's do this. So we signed up for last year, and of course been postponed to this year. Really looking forward to it. I've done a lot of bicycling, but I haven't done any multi-day tours in a few years, so it'll be fun.
Thanks so much for being here, David. Next up, I have Sharon Cohen.
Hi, Sharon Cohen from East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. I, like Ralph, will be doing my 8th ride this year. I can't believe it's been that many, but I'm here just to learn more and help if I can with anything.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And for those who don't know, even though I've sent a lot of emails about this, we have another event coming up with Sharon on June 22nd, Inside the Ride with Sharon Cohen. She's going to spill all the deep, dark, dirty secrets. Hopefully none of that, but you can get the inside scoop with her. Next up, I have Gary Dubin.
Sorry about that. Took me a second to find the unmute button. So I'm, as my friend Mark Simler said, we're both from Pittsburgh. Been to Israel many times, and really here tonight, really to kind of hear maybe what Sharon is going to talk about, kind of the things that aren't on the website, talking about shipping a bike, kind of the what's not in the written materials. And if you've done it 8 times, my guess is a lot of you on this call have a lot of insight and off the record advice that I'd appreciate.
We definitely have that. Thanks so much for being here, Gary. Next up, I have Andrew Fischer.
Hi there. Let's see, I'm doing this ride for, I'm not sure, I've done it 4 or 5 times. This will be my 6th time, I think. And I'm want to hear about how we're going to deal with the travel arrangements given the current times and situation. I'm used to flying direct from Boston on El Al. Those flights don't exist anymore. And I'm nervous about the logistics of getting myself and bike to New York or Montreal from where we'll fly. It'll just be more complicated this time, but I'm looking forward to the ride again.
Great, thanks so much. We're definitely going to be addressing those. Thanks so much, Andrew. Next up, I have Ed. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so I don't want to try. Russakoff?
That's right, Russakoff.
Yes.
I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm on a bike MS team with Gary Dubin, and Gary told me about this ride during a training ride we had several weeks ago. I had never heard of this. This is the first time I even became aware of this ride, and I'm very interested in it, and here just to get whatever basic information I can. And when I was last in Israel 3 years ago, that was on a UJF mission with Mark Sindler, who's also on the call. So hopefully we'll have a large Pittsburgh contingent.
Pittsburgh is a small town, clearly.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here. It's so cool to see all of these connections here. Next up, I have Mark Druy. You're muted, Mark.
There we go. Unmuted now. Great. So yes, I'm Mark Druy. I'm from Arlington, Massachusetts. I guess this will be my 5th ride, I think. Yep, maybe my 5th ride. Usually ride with the Holocene. And Andrew, every time I've flown to Israel, I have flown through New York. It's not a problem. So I could give you tips on that, but it's
Maybe we'll talk about it offline later.
yeah, but I've always flown through New York. And it's not been a problem.
Perfect. That is very good.
Or sometimes
to hear.
even flown through Europe. I've flown through Europe as well, and it has not been a problem. So
Mark has fantastic advice. I email him very, very often for it. Next up, thanks for being here, Mark.
Yep.
Next up, I have another Mark. I have Mark Goldstein.
Good evening. So Mark Goldstein from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 2 years ago, we sent a large contingent, and their pictures were amazing and their stories were even better. And I got excited about it. So I'm looking forward to it, and we'll probably be drafting off of Ralph the whole time. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Mark. Now I have a bunch of people whose cameras are off. So if you're not there, totally fine, but I'm going to call on you and wait a few seconds and see if you pop up. I have Tanya Shipkowitz.
Hello, I'm here. I'm going on the ride because I also love cycling, and I have interest in Israel as well. So like someone said earlier, they want to combine two of their big interests into one. So I'm interested in hearing any suggestions or tips on the logistics of the trip to make it a little less stressful and, easier to kind of get your head wrapped around, especially with the bike, being a bike or renting a bike.
Great. We definitely have tips for you. Thanks for being
and I'm
here,
from St.
Tanya.
Paul. Yeah, St. Paul.
Fantastic. Thank you.
yay, Minnesota.
You too?
I grew up in Minneapolis.
Oh, okay.
We have
And
some
it's just a great
Minnesotans
state,
joining
so.
us this year.
Yeah.
It'll be exciting for everyone to reconnect. Next up on my screen, I have Nina Israel. Nina, are you here? Oh, Nina never rode anywhere. Arava and Israel are very special. Only ride you'll ever participate in. Anxious about the actual ride. Been on your bucket list. We will address those anxieties. We want everyone to feel great coming on this ride. Thanks so much, Nina. Next up on my screen, I have Zahava Harari.
Hi, I live in Queens, New York, and I'm more of a, I guess, casual rider. I've only done really max 40-mile day trips. So I'm not sure if this ride would be appropriate for me or not. And I'm really just curious to hear more about it. And I'm amazed that there are so many people who have done it so many times.
Oh yeah, we have quite a base here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, Zahava. We're really, really excited to share more about what an incredible experience this is. Next up on my screen, I have Sheldon Wolf. Are you able to unmute, Sheldon? I think you turned your video off instead of unmuting. Still a video. Oh, there. Are you unmuted now, Sheldon? I will see in the meantime if there's anyone that I missed. I see that there is an 813 number. I don't know who you are. If you could unveil yourself, that would be very exciting. Still a mystery. Sheldon, we're still not hearing you. If you're able to put your information in the chat, that would be fantastic. I will share that I, again, am Sara Pilavin. I am part of the Israel Ride team. I am calling from Brooklyn, New York. I work at Chazon, which is one of the beneficiaries of the Israel Ride. And I am thrilled to have my brand new colleague, Ilana Eyal, introduce herself.
Thank you, Sarah. My name's Ilana. I'm very excited to be working with Chazon and organizing the Israel Ride. I'm originally from New York. I lived in Israel for many years. And yeah, I just joined and I'm excited to see everyone in Israel.
Thanks, Ilana. She has been incredible since she started. And for everyone who's sick of hearing from me, you now have a new person that's going to annoy you. I am now going to introduce and turn things over to our two chairs for some opening remarks. I am first going to allow Howie Rodenstein, our founder and chairman of the Israel Ride, speak. Howie, take it away.
Hi, I'm Howie. I'm from Boston. This whole thing was my little idea about 19 or 20 years ago. This will be our 18th year or 19th if you include last year's virtual ride. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do the ride every year and meet an incredible group of people. And really looking forward to doing it this year because really missed out and felt like, well, our lives were incomplete in the past year in a whole bunch of ways. But especially for me, not having this trip to Israel and this great experience and meeting a bunch of wonderful people and seeing a bunch of the wonderful alumni that we see from year to year. So welcome, and the idea tonight is to help answer some of your questions and also share with you some of the things that we're thinking through in this brave new world we live in.
Thanks so much, Howie. I'm thrilled to turn things over now to our vice chair, David Eisenberg, who has been in a leadership position on the ride since 2014?
2012.
Oh, so close, so close.
It's close. Yeah. Hi, I'm David Eisenberg. It's great to be here. Since we're doing counters, this will be my 16th ride. To me, really interesting to the comments from a few of you. Why am I here? Because back in, I think it was 2002, I was on the finance committee at Solomon Schechter Day School in Boston, and Howie was another committee member. And he comes up to me at one meeting and he says, "You really love Israel, don't you?" "Yeah, I've heard, yes. And I gather you're a cyclist." "Yes." So like about, I think 5 or 6 of you said, this was the answer. He said, "We're starting this bike ride, why don't you come?" Actually took me a couple of years to get my act together, but I went in 2005 realized what an amazing thing it was. It was more than a bucket list thing. Went back in 2007 and have been back each year since. So it's great to be here tonight. I love all the questions. I do have one or two questions back, almost unrelated, but David, your cousin, the cancer survivor, first, it's great that he's a survivor. Does he do his Dana-Farber fundraising through the Pan Mass Challenge? Or separate?
Yeah, no, he does the Pan Mass Challenge and he raises, I think, over 10,000 a year.
That's great.
So yeah.
I'm one of a decent number of people on the Israel ride each year who's also a PMC rider. So I think this year will be my actually 20th or 21st year of riding the PMC. Another
Wow.
wonderful ride.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. So let me turn it back to Howie, but we're here to address a few things formally, but mostly to be sure that each of the questions that you just raised or that you raise as we get into discussion gets addressed. And Sarah, it does look like Mark, one more person just logged in, so we might ask him
You
to introduce
took the
himself.
words right out of my mouth. Mark RAKER, if you're available to unmute, we're all just going around and sharing our names and where we're calling from and what brought us here today. Oh no, did we scare him away? Oh, there we go. Mark, are you able to? We're not
He's
getting your.
unmuted, but his mic's not picking up.
We've had that issue with a few people. Sheldon, do you know if your volume was able to?
Okay, this ought to do it.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Mark
go.
RAKER.
Sorry, hey, sorry about that to hang you up there. It's you go from Zoom to WebEx to something else that screws it all up. Yeah, I've been engaged in some of the overviews in the past, and this is on my bucket list. So I'm going to stay engaged in all the promo and stuff. And sooner than and then later, I'll be on one of the rides. So it may not be this year, but I'm going to stay engaged.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Mark. Like I shared earlier, this is geared towards first-time riders, prospective riders, people who are interested in learning more about the ride, and returning riders who just want to say shalom or want to get to meet people and hear some interesting updates. Feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat if that is your preference, and we'll make sure that they get answered. I am going to let Howie share any additional opening remarks that he would like. And if you prefer to ask a question out loud, feel free to utilize the raising hand reaction, or you can physically raise your hand and we will make sure to call on you. Howie Rodenstein.
Great. I'm unmuted, yeah. So just, first and foremost, I think that the thing that's biggest on people's minds is, are we going to be able to do the ride this year? We believe at this point that things look very good. The world changes very quickly, just like we had some difficulty in the Middle East 2 weeks ago, and 2 to 3 weeks ago, things happen. But that seems to be behind us, at least for now. From a COVID perspective, the world seems to be, or at least the United States and Israel seem to be returning back to some level of normalcy. Based upon that, we think we're going to be able to run the ride, and we think we're going to be able to run it in a way to deliver a superior experience to everybody like we've done before. There's a lot of things that as the time comes close, the pace of change around us, you all know, is very fast. And the way we look at the world today is very different from 4 weeks ago and 8 weeks ago and 12 weeks ago. And the ride is still a whole bunch of months away. So we haven't determined all of the, dotted all of the I's and crossed all the T's to understand how we're going to handle a number of things, because we're waiting to learn more and see more. But we really think that we're going to be able to pull things together. If there is still at that, the Israeli, it was very encouraging. I read or heard somewhere that the other day, Israel had 4 new cases in the whole country, of which all 4 were people who had come in from outside the country, and they were tested and found there, so that the herd immunity and the vaccine seems to be working, and things are going slowly and in some cases quickly back to normal. If there's testing required at the time of the ride, and whether it's a test 24 hours before or 72 hours before or whatever, we will figure out a way to make arrangements for that to happen consistent with the ride. So we're optimistic. We're going to go forward. We're trying not to say exactly how some of these things are going to work, because we know it's going to be different 3 or 4 months from now. That's kind of the general overview of the direction that we're going in the same. We have a process, and actually the issue of the security situation in Israel is not new. COVID is something that was new for us to deal with, new for you to deal with. The security situation in Israel being sometimes volatile is not new. We are in regular touch towards the time of the ride with the police and with the army, and basically make determinations as to whether we think that it's safe to do what we do. First of all, a few weeks before the ride, based upon the situation and the feedback that we're getting. And then during the ride, every single day as normal process, and it's been so for all the years that we've done the ride. We're in touch with the Army early in the morning to verify that they think it's okay for us to go where we go. And it's a group in the Army that all the school field trips also go to get checked out. So they're not sending us places, or they're only sending us places where they're ready to send their children. And those of you who know Israel know it's a very child-centered society. So they're taking and helping take good care of us. Let me, David, anything you want to add to that before we sort of start to respond to some of the questions?
Thanks. Not a lot. I think the key thing, because we work on recruiting year round. So for months now, people have been saying, "Are you really going to do it?" The short answer is yes. We're really going to do it. Could that change? Yes. Things certainly changed differently than people expected last year. But to reiterate what Howie said, based on where the United States is today, where Israel is today, there's a good chance that there'll be some
Excuse me.
bless you, testing restrictions for people entering the country. Those are Israel's rules. And for leaving the country, that's partly going to be the airlines' needs and partly going to be U.S. immigration needs. But we're pretty confident we can deal with those. The flip thing that I've just been asking people to keep in mind is, as travel opens up, people are booking travel. So right now you go to book your trips, then there's a lot of flights available. It's wonderful. But when you go to book if you want to spend some time in Israel before or after the ride, when you go to book your hotels, some of the hotels that regularly have space, they're already filling up, because, well, a lot of Israelis aren't currently traveling the rest of the world. They're traveling all over Israel. So it's actually kind of important that we know now that this is the plan so that people can start to put their plans in place. I think that's a key thing. But I'm excited about it. The ride will be a good manageable size. We anticipate, somewhere around 150 people, maybe a few less, maybe a few more, but based on where registration is today, that's about the number we think will be there. And that's a good number. It's actually below what we've thought of as capacity in the past. We're pretty happy with that because since we didn't run a ride last year, we'll have some new staff people and some other people who just aren't quite as fluent in things as they were from 2 years ago, because it was an annual thing instead of an every other year. So it's a good number. But I think the key is it's a go, make a plan. Could things change? We've all learned in the last couple of years that things can change rather abruptly, but at this point it's a go and we're very excited about it.
It's also one thing I neglected to mention. I think it's very probable, although it's not a formal yet, that we will want all riders and all staff members to have been vaccinated. That's a choice that people can make, but I think it's a choice that we want to make for those people in our community. We want people who have made that choice. So that's not 100% certain yet, but that's certainly the direction that we're moving towards.
And we should be clear, based on what the travel ministries in Israel have said so far, whether that's our rule or not, that's going to be a rule for any tourist to enter the country. So that's what they've announced so far as the likely policies. It's a policy we kind of like. So, but what we're adding to it is staff and crew who in many cases are not traveling to be there. They already live there. So we want to be sure that they're all vaccinated as well.
Hey, Howie, we have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, let me start by answering a few of the questions that were brought up during the go around. And I think one of the nice things about the Israel ride and the way it's developed is that, first of all, it's a ride and not a race. And second of all, there's people of all different cycling levels and programs to match that. So there were a few people who said, I'm not sure if this is for me or if I've done anything like this, and just understand, and we're happy to talk more to people individually, based upon your particular skills and habits and et cetera. But, we have a group of people that does 30 plus miles a day, which they do in more or less half a day. And then the second half of the day, generally get on a bus and go to some interesting spot that's nearby to either learn something or see something, or and we try and do things that we would refer to as off the beaten track, not on the normal tourist area. And then we have another group that does 50 to 60 miles a day, and another group of hardcore cyclists that do 60 to 90 miles a day at a little bit of a faster pace. So there's kind of a place for all different people, and there are ways to move around amongst the groups, and generally you'll find a place where you see and feel comfortable. And for those of you who still have questions about that, we can, so a question, are there many hills? Well, the answer is easy. We start in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is about 800 meters above sea level, and we end up in Eilat, which is a sea level. So that sounds like it's really in one direction, right? Well, but there are some ups and downs along the way. So there are hills. The shorter routes we try and take in the areas with fewer hills. There are more downhills than uphills, but it is part of the ride. And for those of you who live in places like Florida, I just spent a number of months of the winter in Florida, where the biggest hill in South Florida, I think, is the causeway that goes, a little bridge that goes between Miami and Key Biscayne. It's good to ride into heavy winds, because that gives you the feeling a little bit of what riding on a hill is. But it's something that is a challenge of the ride, but I think people learn to deal with the challenge. And there's not a heck of a lot of difference between riding slowly up a hill and walking up a hill with your bike. So everybody's capable of that. And there are sag wagons, if you get tired, that go along with us, and you can just say, I've had enough for a while, put your bike up on a bike trailer, get in an air-conditioned car or bus, and take a little time off, whether that's on a flat, whether that's on an uphill, or whether that's on a downhill. Nobody is keeping track of who jumped on the bus when, or I shouldn't say that. People sometimes keep track of themselves, but we're not keeping track. It's really all about enjoying it and doing what's best for you. One of the questions was about, should I bring my bike? And is that a big hassle, or how does that work? We have rental bikes. There's both road bikes and hybrid bikes on the rental side. They're of decent quality. I wouldn't call them top quality, but they're of decent quality. The cost, generally, you have to pay to bring your bike on an airline. Sometimes we get deals with airlines that allow us to bring the bike without charge. And with El Al, we've gotten that some years, and sometimes when we have the deal, it works. And sometimes when we have the deal, you get to the airport and the El Al people say, I don't care what your letter says or whatever, and it doesn't work. So the costs are generally pretty similar. In general, what I say is, if you have a relationship with your bike, you should bring it. And if you don't know what that sort of means, or that doesn't make any sense to you, then it's okay to rent a bike. We have, it's relatively easy to bring your bike. You do need to take it apart or bring it to a bike store that'll take it apart for you and put it in a bike box. But then when you get to Israel, we meet you at the airport and take the box away from you, so that before we get started, you don't have to schlep a box around with you for however many days you're in the country before the ride starts. Then your bike magically appears at the hotel when we start to do the orientation for the ride. We have mechanics to help you set it up from there. And then at the back end, the same thing happens. At the end of the ride, we have mechanics to help you take it apart. It goes on a truck, and you basically, then we come to meet you at the airport when you're leaving, whether it's a day after the ride or 2 weeks after the ride, and meet you with your bike, and you take it back on the plane with you. Want to fire some more questions?
Did you see the one about the route?
I'm not looking at the chat. Let me look at.
I might add one thing on, for people who are using one of our rental bikes. If you use clips on your pedals, you should bring your own pedals. If you have a saddle seat that you're comfortable with, we recommend you bring your own seat. And if there's any accessories that you like having on your bike, bring them. Our mechanics will put all that on your rental bike, and at the end of the ride, they'll remove it. You can bring it back with you. So, you know, pedals and saddles tend to be two things that, you know, in many cases, people have a specific one they like. So it's a good idea to bring those.
To be
And
clear, also, our rentals do not come with clips because clips are very specific to the shoes
Right,
that you are wearing.
that's,
So
I thought I said that. Yeah.
you may have, I just wanted to reiterate.
Bring your pedal. I think Sarah already answered in the chat stream, but not everybody, people might not all be following that. Bring your own helmet. And an important thing that at least I've learned over the years is airlines are not perfect at getting your luggage to Israel on the first shot. Usually they do, but every year there's a few people whose luggage arrives late, maybe takes a scenic trip around the world. Because of that, I always bring at least 1 day's cycling gear in my carry-on. So my helmet's in my carry-on, my shoes, and one cycling outfit. And that's based on experience of trying to replace that stuff in Jerusalem while we waited a few days for Delta to find my bicycle and my Gear One gear. So I think that's a good piece of advice for most everybody, unless you already have extra gear in Israel.
Something that I will also add is if you have any questions about what accessories you may or may not be compatible with our rentals, feel free to reach out to us and we will send your questions along to our mechanics who will let you know. And also, David Eisenberg, I actually don't know if you know this, but I've been generating a list of tips from our vice chair about bringing your own bike, because you've emailed a lot of people about this and I just combined everything. So if anyone has any questions about best practices for bringing your own bike, I have compiled a list that was unknowingly created by David Eisenberg.
That's cool.
In terms
Probably the
of-
reason I have strong views on that is the year that Delta sent my bike for an extra trip around the world, which I'm sure the bike enjoyed, but
Well-traveled bike.
Did make the first day of the ride. The day was fine. I used one of the rental bikes, but the day before that was kind of stressful because I didn't have any of my gear with me. So hence that piece of advice. One comment I did learn that time, I learned it from a travel agent actually. The issue isn't so much connections, it's the size of the flight, the size of the airplane at the beginning of your journey. If it's a very small plane, multiple people have told me this is Delta's policy. If it's a very small plane and there are things as large as bike cases, they just leave them all off and put them on the next flight they have with the bigger plane. But sometimes that means that all the luggage misses the connection. So it is worth checking the size of the first plane you're on to be sure that it's a decent sized plane, not a commuter plane that's going to connect you to the decent sized plane that's going to fly you to Israel. If you have a Europe connection, won't be an issue. The transatlantic flights from the States are all big planes. If you're connecting out of New York, you do want to check the equipment that your initial flight's on.
Howie, we got some questions about rest stops.
Rest stops. So the rest stops, this is not, and there was a question about a route, and I'll kind of put that together. Well, how do we know? This is not really a cue sheet, what you would, a cue sheet and go ride. It's a very highly supported ride. We ride with a lead rider in front and a sweep rider in the back. And although we do tend to spread out, when we get to rest stops, we stop and we gather as a group. And then we leave together as a group. The rest stops are generally every 10 to 15 miles, and some of that varies also by the riding group, so that in the shorter ride, you'll probably for 30 miles, you'll have 2 rest stops, one at mile 10-ish and one at mile 20-ish. And the others, it's every 10 to 15 and sometimes 20 miles on the longer rides for a rest stop. A rest stop has water, and it has food, nuts and energy bars and that kind of food. And then generally we have lunch every day on the road. The lunch has a lot of food, probably too much food in terms of what we put together. The question about routes, the answer is really it's a combination. The question is, are they marked? Do we have to have a GPS or a map, or how do we get around? And it really varies. When we're in urban areas, there tends to be more turns. Once we get into the Negev, which starts really on the second day, there's not a lot of places to get lost. We do offer GPS, ride with GPS, that you can download onto your phone or onto a bike computer. In areas where there's a tendency to get lost, we'll have crew people standing there letting you know where to go. And we also give cue sheets, which give you each turn and the mileage associated with each turn. If I need to bring my own food bars, can I hand them off to someone to keep for me? We have this concept of what we call a day bag, and the day bags are meant just for that kind of thing. For some people, it might be medication. For some people, it might be camera equipment that they don't want to carry, or it may be specialized food. Each time we get to a rest stop, the day bag goes on the bus or the vehicle that's the sweep vehicle. So when everybody gets to the rest stop, then that gets there and you can get access to it and get from your day bag whatever it is that you need. Whether some people like their own sunscreen, although we provide sunscreen, it may not be the brand that you like. So yes, that's all doable. Somebody said the shipping case costs $300 and up. Shipping cases can cost that, but the majority of people just ship their bikes in bike boxes, cardboard boxes, that if you go to a bike store to knock the bike down for you, they just use boxes they get from new bikes that they just received and set up, so that you don't have to buy a bike case. Yeah, so it is good to do that.
We have a question about pre and post-ride activities. I'm so happy you asked, Sheldon. We had a whole meeting today finalizing our pre and post-ride tours. We're going to be officially sending out details and registration options soon, but we can share that we have 2 pre-ride tours and 2 post-ride tours. Our first pre-ride tour is a Northern Israel culinary food tour, and that's going to be 2 days and 1 night. And we also have an East-West Jerusalem tour that's going to be partially led by Tarek, who's the incoming executive director of the Arava Institute, one of the Israel Ride beneficiaries. And that's going to be a 1-day tour. Our 2 post-ride tour options, one is an immersive experience at the Arava Institute, and the other is indeed a trip to the UAE. And we're really, really excited. They're really cool. I would share more details, but I'm going to send you a whole butt ton of emails tomorrow about it. So stay tuned and be excited.
What other questions do we have?
What's the percentage of repeat riders versus newbies each year?
So generally, we have about 35% of the riders who are repeat riders. And that's not that people who come back every year. We have a lot of people that come back after 2 years or after 3 years or after 5 years. And generally, when these people come back a second time, they'll come back with their cousin or their college roommate, or bring another a few people with them. As of now, we have a slightly higher portion of people. About half of our registrants now are alumni. I think that's partly just because the way the world has been, and we always have a strong group of alumni. But lots of people are new. Many people come in big teams. Some people come as groups of 2 or 3 people. And I'd say a third of our people come on their own. So there's plenty of opportunity to meet new people. And what you'll find is magically you'll keep bumping into the same people on the road on your bike during the day, because people who tend to ride at the same speed tend to get to the more or less the same places. And it's a nice way to get to know somebody.
Yeah, I think I'd stress, there are, any given year between alums and people who are there with friends or family, it's probably half or slightly more than half of the ride, but everybody leaves with new friends. So whether you show up I love it that there's so many alumni who I know from past years, but even though I know a lot of people, I still come back each year with some new friends who, even though they don't live in Boston, I know we'll still be in touch years from now. It's a friendly group. You think about the prerequisites, as we talked about at the top. It's people who enjoy cycling and enjoy Israel. It's people who will give up 2 weeks of their life to go to Israel to bike, to raise money, to support a school that works on environmental issues and peace issues, and to support the great work of Hazon. That's a pretty cool group of people. And it's so at a minimum, you start off with that in common with everybody else, and you will come back with new friends if you don't go with people you already know. Either way, you'll come back with new friends.
I see another question here. What are the evening activities post-ride, and how is the weather? The biggest evening activity is showering, getting something to eat, and sleeping. But in general, we will have, and we always have, one of the critical things in the ride is the evening briefing, because as much planning as we do, stuff happens, weather happens, and it's really important to sort of update everybody as to what's going on. A number of nights, we also will have a short speaker program that's optional. Oftentimes we have alumni of the Arava Institute who are serving as crew, talk about the things that they're doing in their real lives as part of it. So that's a little bit about evening activities.
I will share from a lot of, oh, sorry, were you still talking, Howie?
I was just going to say, mostly people want to get something to eat, maybe a little something to drink, and then head for bed, because we tend to wake up pretty early in the morning.
But we should stress the evening briefing. The briefing part isn't optional. It's actually, in a very real way, it's part of the safety routine for the ride, because it includes a conversation about things that were observed that day on the road that frankly could have kept people safer or put people in danger. And it includes comments about safety issues for people to keep in mind the next day. It's also a great opportunity in that we have multiple certified professional guides on the ride, but we're on bicycles during the day. We're not on a tour bus where they're at the front of the bus with a megaphone. So the evening briefing is also an opportunity often to hear from them a little bit of a preview of the places you're going to see on the route the next day. But the safety part of it makes it definitely required attendance.
Howie, can you speak to the approximate temperatures along the route?
Yeah, so those of you who know Israel a little bit know Israel only has 2 seasons, summer and winter. There is no spring or no fall. But the ride is generally done at the time where the weather can be trying to decide whether it's summer weather or winter weather. We're kind of right on that edge, and some years we get summer weather and we can have temperatures in the desert well into the 90s, although it's dry heat. In other years, it's more of winter weather, and we have temperatures in the desert, maybe in the 70s or low 80s, and we can have a morning coming out of Jerusalem where you feel like it'd be nice to have sleeves on, not just or a light jacket, you know, not just short sleeves. So it's in the evening in the desert. It cools down a little bit, but still, you can most evenings feel very comfortable in shorts and short sleeves. Although in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem area, in the evening it can get a little cool. So I can't tell you this year whether it's going to be spring, whether it's going to be winter or summer, but or some combination thereof.
I believe that Andy wanted to comment on the evening briefings. Andy, if you're able to unmute. Could you, there we go.
Okay, I wanted to say something about the evening briefings and about, there's another piece to this ride that goes beyond the bicycling, which is the organizations that are being supported by this ride. The Arava Institute does things that, particularly in light of what went on in the last few weeks, is inspiring to those of us who believe that Zionism and peaceful coexistence can go hand in hand. The evening briefings are also an opportunity for us, it's one of many opportunities for us to hear about the work of Hazon and the Arava Institute, what the Arava Institute does in bringing all the people that live in the land of Israel, whether Jewish or Arab or whatever, to work together, because the land, no one survives if the land isn't maintained. The evening briefings are a time when you hear from people in Gaza about how they're able to have electricity because of the assistance in setting up solar panels from the Arava Institute, from people who have water because of what the Arava Institute does in working Arab and Jews together. And for me, at a time when things can be very bleak, the opportunity to hear the Arava students talk about what they're doing and see every day as you ride the solidarity of working together side by side is something that doesn't get covered when the riots in Lud and the bombing and the stuff in the news doesn't cover this stuff, and it's an inspiration even beyond doing the ride. In fact, it's an inspiration for doing the ride. I think Howie and David didn't mention that the crew are Arava alums, and so not only is the evening meetings, but at each rest stop, you're talking about people who have been studied together at the Arava Institute and are coming back to do crew because it's a chance for them to come back and be with each other again. And all that is part of a immersion that you will have in a world that doesn't get covered on CNN or Fox, a world of Jew and Arab working together.
Very well said.
Thanks so much, Andy.
It's why I keep coming back.
I thought it was me.
That too, but
We do forge very, very special
was-
bonds.
Andy was the second person to sign up for the first Israel ride. I was the first and Andy was the second, and he was on the first Israel ride when we had no idea what we were doing.
it was a great experience. Everyone since has been, well, everyone's been good.
Thanks, Andy. David Eisenberg, talk to the people about Shabbat.
I'm so glad you asked. And this follows up a little bit on Andy's comments. And one of the other questions also in the stream. This is much more than a bike ride. The bike ride is wonderful, but the bike ride is, as Andy alluded to, the bike ride's also a rolling showcase for the relationships that people build while they're at the Araba Institute, because they're our crew throughout the ride, and we get to know them. We get to see the trust relationships they have with each other, and we get to learn from them. So, this is going on throughout, but it's important to keep in mind we're on bikes for 5 days. The Israel ride is for 7 though. So there's a day of orientation and safety checks, practice ride, et cetera, at the very beginning. That we determined a long time ago does a lot towards helping create the initial community, but maybe even more important, it helps make sure that when you first get on your bike for the ride, it's not after 5 days of being on airplanes and traveling and you're not really ready for it because you've had a practice ride the day before. And then Shabbat, it's in the middle of the ride. So we've had 3 days of riding together as a community. Our initial chills of, are we really up for this, are past. Everyone's a bit more confident and relaxed. It's at Mitzperamon, which for those of you who have not been there, Mitzperamon is a beautiful spot in the middle of the desert overlooking Maktesh Ramon, which if you haven't seen it, think miniature version of the Grand Canyon. So really beautiful setting. All of our programming on Shabbat is optional. So you can just use it as a day to relax, enjoy the desert scenery, take your own hikes around the town and in the Maktesh. But we do also have choices for rider-led services that it's always a different group that comes together to lead it, but they're often very meaningful to participate in. There's also a more orthodox service in the community that people sometimes attend. There's a great opportunity during the day to attend a group of discussions with alumni of the Araba Institute. And, frankly, for many of our riders, there's a good chance they've never actually met and spoken to a Palestinian. It's not the world you usually deal with. So within these groups, each group will be at least 2 alums, one who's probably Jewish Israeli, and the other is not. And you'll get to hear from them about their experiences, what it was like for them to make the decision to attend the Araba Institute, what it meant for them. And riders can ask them, respectfully, but ask them your questions about their perspectives on the region. There's also an opportunity to learn from people at Hazon about the really pioneering research that's being done by Hazon. So it's a day off the bike. It's a very relaxing day with more opportunity for people who want it to get to see the impact of the 2 organizations the ride supports. And then maybe one of the more magical parts of the day, it ends with Havdalah on the edge of the Maktesh. It's a really beautiful setting and a nice place to celebrate the end of Shabbat and get us started on preparing for the next 2 days of riding. But I did just want to stress it's a wonderful bike ride, but there's also a question about, for people who keep coming back, does the route change? The years that the ride goes from Jerusalem to Eilat, it evolves, but the route doesn't change a whole lot. There's actually not that many roads on the route from Jerusalem to Eilat. So I think I know that.
FYI, we have our teammate in Israel, Abigail, who's doing her route test tomorrow. So
Perfect.
Stay tuned for some photos.
But I think key to your question, why do people come back? They come back because of the community the Israel Ride creates. And it's a wonderful community to be a part of. So they don't come back because it'll be a different route this year, although occasionally we do, a few times we've done part of the ride up north. But they come back because the route's good, the community is amazing, and it's nice to reconnect with it once a year, or every other year, or every third year, depending on the person. And it's also, you know, I made a comment earlier about the number of riders who are alums of the Pan Mass Challenge here in Massachusetts. That's another ride that it does the same route every year, but there'll be 5,000 or 6,000 people on it every year, over half of whom are alums, and they're back because they support the mission that the ride supports, and it's a good route. Doesn't have to change that much, but it's a great community to be a part of, and I think that's why people come back to the Israel Ride.
Thanks, David. Bill Rosenbaum, you have been so patient. I would love for you to ask your question.
It's really not a question. It's more of a comment, because speaking to some of the people that are the newbies, I was a newbie in 2019. It was my first ride, and I had a lot of the same questions that people are asking. And I think it's important for them to hear from a participant that you're dealing with a group of very accommodating, knowledgeable people that will make you feel like this is the best opportunity or situation you've ever been in. They run it so smoothly, and they are so accommodating to everybody's needs, because imagine 150 Jewish people in the same place, how many different needs there are. Probably 300. That's a joke, of course. But
no, it's not.
But they are so accommodating. The other thing I was going to speak to is on the airlines. Most airlines, and I've researched many of them, will allow you to bring your sporting equipment, which includes a bicycle, as long as it does not exceed their physical size limitations or weight limitations as one of the pieces of luggage. So in my case, I fly British Air. I bring my own bike. It costs me nothing. It's one of my pieces of luggage. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I just want to follow up on what Bill said, because on El Al, now I know not everybody can travel with hand luggage, but I've worked this out over the years that I bring only hand luggage with me and my bicycle, and El Al does not charge me because my bicycle becomes my luggage. So if you travel light and you can be succinct on how you do things, I think when I was in Boston, I usually fly through Boston. This year will be New York, but I've had people say, how did you manage that? And it's because I only bring hand luggage. But what I just want to follow up, you said, for the riders, I've done this multitude of times. You do come back for the community, you come back for the ride, you come back for the physical challenge. When you talk about coming back every other year, I came back 2 years in a row and then met totally different people. And then I couldn't stop coming because there were so many friends from each year. So this is sort of how I've accommodated myself by just like, I feel like I'm going to summer camp for a week, but you work really hard. It's very rewarding. From a woman's perspective, since there's a number of you women, I mean, there's much fewer women than there are men on the trip, but we're a growing minority. I mean, I think my first year there were very few, and there've been more and more each year. I don't have the statistics, but I know that that's been true. And they will do whatever you need. My first year, we didn't even go to the towards the Mediterranean because things were not so wonderful there. We went to the West Bank area. We drove, it was a totally different route. So the first 2 years that I went, the 2 first days were totally different. Once you hit Mitzpeh Ramon, there's really, to stay on the back roads, there's really only one way to get there. And that has not changed at all. But if you want to change from one group to another because you're not feeling you've got your mojo, you can change down. You want to change up, you can change up if you want to, see if you can do something a little harder. They really make this a seamlessly wonderful trip. I said originally that it was a once in a lifetime opportunity that I keep coming back for every year.
Thank you, Sharon. I love having these events, both because it's lovely to meet everyone, but also it's a huge ego boost, if I'm being honest. Thank you all for such kind words. And Zahaba, thank you for your question about fundraising, which is a very, very important question. I'm going to let David Eisenberg speak to that.
So the First of all, it is a fundraising ride. So to be clear, the fundraising is a requirement. I know that there are some day rides that people do with different charities in the US where the fundraising is a best effort. With the Israel ride, it's a requirement. And to be fair, for every one of the other bike rides in Israel, it's a requirement. So that's a key thing to keep in mind. Depending on the rider, for this year, there are a couple of different minimums, but I think for most riders, the minimum is $4,200. First off, the natural question, why are there differences? For people who rolled over from last year, I think we left it at last year's minimum. And then for younger riders and some other special groups, there's a lower minimum. But anticipate $4,200. We love the fact that the average raised by our riders is higher than that. This is one of the most important fundraisers each year for both the Institute and Hazon, so those numbers matter. Two things for context. One is if you do a back roads ride in Israel for the same amount of time, it actually costs you about $7,000. So tells you a few things. The most important one is how much money Backroads makes, but we've, even though this is a fundraising ride, we've tried to keep the numbers at a level where it's approachable by most people. The fundraising does take an effort. It's peer-to-peer fundraising, so it's as we say, it's friends asking friends. The best approach to that, frankly, depends on how you best relate to your friends. So we have some riders who, it's all personal. It's getting together with people over coffee or a meal or something else and explaining why they're doing it and asking for money. We have other people who make tremendous use of the tools that are available through our website, and they send out hopefully personalized emails that explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and invite people to support them. That's actually the approach that I've used for years. A few tips that are worth keeping in mind. When you're reaching out to friends, it's about why this is important to you. So you want to be able to capture why it speaks to you that you're doing this bike ride that supports environmental leadership, peace building, etc. It also, different people have different sort of tools or tricks that they've used over the years. Show your commitment. So you're already contributing, and whether you're contributing, half or you're contributing a portion, but just for people to know that it's not just that you're going to be working hard to be sure you're in shape to do this bike ride across Israel to raise money for this cause, but you're also making a meaningful contribution to it. That matters. Something I actually extended on from something another rider did a number of years ago that I thought was, probably very touching to their donors, which was, they had all their donors' names on a sheet of paper that they carried with them for the whole ride, so that they could say to them pretty directly, "You really will be with me. It's not just in spirit, but your name's with me." I ride with an Israeli flag. Ever since I saw that thing with the names, I've had the names of my donors on the flag. That seems a little cheesy to some, but I can't tell you the number of donors who have told me how meaningful it is to them that's what we do. People have done different gifts for their donors as an acknowledgement. Sending a book that's meaningful, that's about the region or the environment. What I do every year, I'm also active in Jewish National Fund, so I plant a tree in honor of each donor and use the tree certificate as essentially the thank you note. But this is the only ride I do where I get thank you notes for the thank you note. People find it very meaningful to get the tree certificate. So it means I plant a lot of trees, but I like planting the trees. So that's kind of a nice thing. Fundraising is doable. Probably the key to it is figure out how you best connect with your friends and design how you reach out around that. And the other thing that is hugely important, unless there's some reason why you prefer to put it off, starting sooner is better. it, it'll take time. And the sooner you reach out to people and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm excited, will you support it? The sooner the gifts will come in. And frankly, once you see one come in, you'll be excited to send out the next email. It's not just going to be one email and then you're done. I note that I don't think I've ever sent out an email to a group of people and not had it generate at least one more donation. And so basically what I do every year is this initial email that says what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how much I appreciate their support. And then the subsequent emails are basically updates on how the fundraising is going, how my training's going, how I'm excited about it, and once again, attaching the link. And it's all actually pretty easy. You just have to make some time to do it. So Hava, that's probably a lot more than the question you meant to ask, but hopefully it helped.
A couple questions that I've received. Someone asked about fundraising minimums met at different times. Right now, we have an incentive going on that if you reach your fundraising minimum by June 15th, you are eligible for a long sleeved version of our jersey. It is very exciting. People really like it. I'm in talks with our jersey people. We have cool designs happening. So if you are close to meeting your fundraising minimum, I highly encourage you to meet that before June 15th for that awesome jersey. And if you need resources for fundraising, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise money for us. So we have all the resources you could possibly ever want and need. Feel free to reach out. Another question that I have been getting from a lot of folks is about the hotels that we are staying at. The hotels that we are staying at throughout the ride are available on our site. I'm actually going to link where they're available on our site. And for those folks who are already registered, that info is also available in our forms portal. Again, hotels are available under our FAQs page. If you look under preparing and accommodations, and it shows what hotels we're staying at each night. I've also been getting a lot of questions about booking hotels for the couple days before and a couple days after the ride. That is something that is also going to be included in an email out to our riders tomorrow. And the short version is we are going to be able to handle that for you. There's been some confusion because the hotels that we are staying at in Jerusalem took the opportunity while they were closed over the last year to do renovations. So they are not technically open for business now, but will be by the time we get there. So there was some concern that there was no availability listed on their site. Do not worry, they are open, they are available, we're in contact with them, and we're going to be able to get everyone booked pre and post ride wherever you would like, not wherever you would like. I shouldn't say that, at the specific places that we offer. Other questions that I've been getting, for sample fundraising letters, we actually have that information available on our site, but also in the individual fundraising pages that people receive after registering. On the back end of your fundraising page, there's also a copy of a sample fundraising letter that you can use. These customizable fundraising pages are super, super cool. I have really great things to say about them. Contributions to Chazon and the Arava Institute. Someone's asking about contributions being tax deductible. Howie.
Contributions by contributions of peers, of friends who make a contribution to you are tax deductible. Contributions that you make for yourself to sponsor yourself will have some partial tax deductibility. Some of those things are changing as to how they're done, and we're working on that now. But in general, the way to look at this is that the cost of the ride, which is the cost of hotels and everything associated with putting together the ride, is roughly the cost of your registration fee plus 50% of your fundraising. And the other roughly 50% of your fundraising is what we target to be to our beneficiaries. Just one other thing, there were a couple of people who talked about having the Israel ride on their bucket list. All I can say is that life is short, shit happens. We all know that from what we've seen this past year. Lots of, if you can do it, do it. You put it on your calendar and it happens. And we'd love to have you. But there's no time like now, and there are too many people I know who just put stuff off on their bucket list and then never got to do it. So none of us are getting younger. Even the younger ones are not getting younger.
What? No one told me.
Don't worry, Sarah, it'll sneak up on you.
You know, I have heard this. For anyone here that has not yet registered and would like to register, I'm gonna drop that link in the chat. Do with it what you will. Also, if you are,
Sarah, what's for reminder, what's the best discount code for them to use if they register now?
that was such a great question. I have too many tabs open. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm going to send that in a follow-up email to y'all.
Good, thank you.
I'm not going to make you wait for me to find the right tab. Also, I'm going to be sending up a follow-up email with a bunch of handy information, things we may have forgotten to cover, people to get in touch with, that discount code that David mentioned. If anyone has any further questions that we did not have the opportunity to get to on this call, things they maybe did not want to discuss in such a public setting, feel free to reach out to any of us here. You can email info@israelride.org. On our site, there is availability to book a one-on-one video call if you want to have specific questions answered. That way you don't have to do a bunch of emailing back and forth about when people are available and getting confused about different time zones. Definitely something that's never happened to me. And again, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. I think we were only supposed to go till 9 and it's almost 9:30. So I want to let everyone here be free. Thank you all again so much. Thank you to Howie and David for all of your very helpful information. Thank you to our alum that joined us to show support and to say very nice things about me. And thank you to all of our new and prospective riders who joined us. If you're coming this year, I'm so excited. If you are not yet coming this year, see what I did there? I'm excited to get you signed up. We also would love for you to join whenever the time is right for you. So if this year is not your year, that is okay. Maybe next year is your year. We have all future Israel Ride dates listed until 2024, I want to say. We're planning ahead. So feel free to reach out about a future Israel Ride that works for you. Again, I'm going to send a follow-up email. Feel free to be in touch with me. And it was really lovely to speak and connect with all of you tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye-bye.